The email that changed everything arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. I still remember staring at the screen, my coffee growing cold beside me as I read the name in my inbox. Marcus Reed. 5 years had passed since I'd heard from him. 5 years since he walked out of my apartment and my life, leaving me alone and 3 months pregnant. And now, here he was, applying for a position at my company. My company. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who once told me I'd never amount to anything was now begging me for a job. I sat back in my chair, absently running my hand over my growing tech empire's logo embroidered on my blazer. From a single mom on food stamps to CEO of a thriving startup. This wasn't how either of us had pictured our story ending. But endings have a funny way of turning into beginnings, don't they? ID. Love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. It was a brisk autumn evening in Seattle when my world collapsed. I was sitting on my worn couch in our small Belltown apartment, surrounded by paperwork from my mid-level marketing job, when Marcus stormed in. His face was tight, his movements agitated as he paced across our living room floor. "We need to talk, Eliza," he said, his voice cutting through the comfortable silence we'd built over 3 years together. Something in his tone made my skin prickle. I set aside the reports I'd been reviewing and looked up at him, trying to ignore the sudden tightness in my chest. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the growing unease. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing, but now seemed like a theatrical preparation for what was coming next. "I can't do this anymore," he said flatly. "Us. This life. It's not what I want." The words hung in the air between us, sharp and impossible to unhear. I felt my throat constrict as I struggled to process what he was saying. "What are you talking about? We're having a baby, Marcus." My hand instinctively moved to my stomach, still only showing the slightest curve at 12 weeks along. His eyes followed my movement, then darted away. "That's part of the problem." The room seemed to tilt slightly as his words sank in. Just 3 weeks ago, we'd seen our baby's heartbeat on the ultrasound. He squeezed my hand, whispered that he couldn't wait to meet our little one. "Had that all been a lie? You said you wanted this," I whispered, hating the tremor in my voice. Marcus laughed, a hollow sound that contained no humor. "I said what you wanted to hear, Eliza. That's what people do when they're trapped." "Trapped?" The word felt like a slap. "No one trapped you. We made decisions together." He shook his head, already moving toward our bedroom. "I never decided on a baby. That was your decision." I followed him, watching in stunned silence as he pulled a suitcase from our closet and began throwing clothes inside. His movements were hurried but deliberate, as if he'd rehearsed this moment. "You can't just leave," I said, my voice rising, with panic. "We need to talk about this. We can figure it out." Marcus didn't even pause as he continued packing. "There's nothing to figure out. I'm not ready to be a father. I'm not sure I'll ever be." He zipped the suitcase with finality. "And let's be honest, Eliza, you're not exactly CEO material. How are you going to support a kid on your own?" The casual cruelty of his assessment hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so busy trying to process his abandonment that I hadn't yet considered the practical realities of single motherhood. "I make good money," I countered, though we both knew my mid-level position barely covered our shared expenses. "And you have responsibilities here. Legal ones, if nothing else." He shrugged, finally turning to face me. "Sue me for child support if you want. It won't amount to much on my salary anyway." I stared at him, searching for any trace of the man I thought I'd known. The man who had held me when my mother died last year, who had talked about our future with such conviction that I never once doubted we were building something lasting. "Is there someone else?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop. It a flicker of something. Guilt, perhaps, crossed his face before he masked it. That's not the point. But it was enough. How long? My voice had gone quiet now, unnaturally calm in the face of this betrayal. It doesn't matter. It matters. To me. Marcus sighed, checking his watch as if this conversation was keeping him from something important. A few months, but this isn't about her. I was already having doubts about us before anything happened. A few months. Which meant while I'd been suffering through morning sickness, while I'd been excitedly planning for our future together, he'd been building an escape route with someone else. "You're a coward," I said, the words emerging with surprising clarity through my shock. "Walking out on your child before they even have a chance." His face hardened. "Better now than after they're born. Trust me, they're better off without me." On that point, at least, we suddenly agreed. He grabbed his suitcase and moved toward the door. I didn't try to stop him. My body felt frozen in place. My mind struggling to process the speed with which my life was imploding. At the threshold, he paused, fishing in his pocket. "Here," he said, tossing his key onto the side table. "I won't need this anymore." The door closed behind him with a soft click that belied the devastation he'd left in his wake. The apartment, so cozy just minutes before, now felt cavernous, achingly empty. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, and waited for the tears to come. But they didn't. Instead, a strange numbness spread through me, as if my body was protecting me from feeling the full impact of what had just happened. The soft glow of my laptop screen caught my attention from where I'd left it on the coffee table. Open on the screen was a project I'd been working on, marketing plans for a new app launch. In that moment, staring at my work, something shifted inside me. If Marcus thought I couldn't support myself and my child, if he believed I wasn't CEO material, he was about to be proven spectacularly wrong. I pushed myself up from the floor and walked to my laptop. I had a half-finished business plan saved on my hard drive, an idea for a startup I'd been developing on weekends, something Marcus had called a cute hobby when I'd tried to share my enthusiasm with him. But I knew it was more than that. I'd spent enough time in the industry to see the gaps, to understand what was missing from the market. My hand returned to my stomach, to the small life growing there, the life Marcus had so easily discarded. "It's just you and me now, little one," I whispered. "But we're going to be okay. Better than okay." I opened the business plan document and began to read. Really read, seeing its potential with new clarity. The numbness was receding now, replaced by something harder, something colder, but also something powerful. I couldn't control Marcus's choices. I couldn't force him to be the man I thought he was. But I could control what happened next. I could build something from this wreckage, something that would ensure my child would never want for anything, would never feel abandoned the way I did right now. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Instead of hiding under the covers as part of me desperately wanted to, I sat up at my kitchen table with my laptop, a notebook, and a determination that felt like fire in my veins. By the end of the day, I'd refined my business plan, researched startup accelerators accepting applications, and scheduled coffee with 2 former colleagues who had connections in venture capital. I'd also made an appointment with an attorney to understand my rights regarding child support, not because I expected much from Marcus, but because my child deserved everything that was rightfully theirs. As the sun set over the Seattle skyline, I realized I hadn't cried once. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath my breastbone, but it was now fuel rather than a weight. Marcus had walked out thinking he was escaping a burden, never realizing that in doing so, he'd freed me to become someone he would never have allowed me to be. The irony wasn't lost on me, even then. But I wasn't laughing yet. That would come. Later, much later, when an application with a familiar name landed on my desk, and the true circular nature of our story revealed itself. The weeks following Marcus's departure blurred together in a haze of nausea, some from pregnancy, some from stress, and some from the sheer magnitude of what I was attempting to do. By day, I continued my marketing job, smiling through meetings while hiding the growing evidence of my pregnancy with strategic blazers and loose blouses. By night, I transformed into a one-woman planning machine, fueled by herbal tea and desperation. My apartment had become command central for Operation New Life, as I'd started calling it in my head. Sticky notes covered my refrigerator with lists of potential investors, startup competitions, and tech incubators accepting applications. My coffee table disappeared beneath market research printouts, competitor analyses, and financial projections that I revised nightly. What had once been a vague idea, a platform connecting small businesses with freelancers that specialized in their exact needs, now consumed every spare moment of my life. I'd seen firsthand the inefficiencies of generic freelance marketplaces during my years in marketing. Small businesses wasted countless hours and dollars sorting through applicants who weren't truly qualified for their specific industry. My platform would change that, using specialized algorithms to match skills and experience with exact business needs. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was building a business around the concept of finding the perfect match when my own personal match had proven so catastrophically wrong. 6 weeks after Marcus walked out, I sat in my OB/GYN's office, waiting for my 18-week appointment. The waiting room was filled with other pregnant women, most accompanied by partners who held their hands or flipped through parenting magazines. I kept my eyes firmly on my tablet, making notes on a pitch deck I was preparing, ignoring the occasional, pitying glances from the couples around me. Eliza Bennett? The nurse called my name, and I gathered my things, following her to the exam room. Dr. Patel entered a few minutes later, her kind eyes taking in my solitary presence. She'd met Marcus at my first appointment, but hadn't asked about his absence at the 12-week visit that came just after he left. I appreciated her discretion. "How are you feeling, Eliza?" she asked, settling onto her stool. "Physically, much better," I answered truthfully. "The morning sickness has finally backed off." She nodded, making a note in my chart. "And emotionally, I hesitated, unused to discussing the tornado that had become my emotional state. "I'm adjusting." Dr. Patel's eyes softened. "Single parenting isn't easy, but I've seen many women thrive in circumstances similar to yours." "I don't have much choice but to make it work," I replied, attempting a smile. "No, I suppose not." She glanced at my tablet, still open to spreadsheets and projections. "Working hard, I see." "Starting a business," I said, surprised at the pride. That crept into my voice. It was the first time I'd said those words aloud to anyone outside my small circle of confidants. "A tech startup. I'm applying to accelerator programs." Her eyebrows rose, impressed rather than doubtful. "That's ambitious, especially with a baby on the way." "Because of the baby," I corrected gently. "I need to build something stable, something that belongs to me. Something no one can walk away from and leave us with nothing." I didn't add. Dr. Patel nodded, understanding passing between us. "Well, let's make sure both you and baby are healthy for this journey ahead. Ready to see how your little one is doing. Today?" The cold gel on my growing belly was a small shock, but nothing compared to the wave of emotion that hit me when the image appeared on the screen. My baby had transformed from the bean-shaped blur of my 12-week scan to something undeniably human. Tiny fingers, a distinct profile, legs kicking with surprising energy. "Do you want to know the sex?" Dr. Patel asked, moving the wand to get a better angle. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "It's a girl," she said softly. "And she looks perfect." A daughter. I was having a daughter. Somehow, this knowledge made everything more real, more urgent. I hadn't allowed myself many moments of emotional vulnerability since Marcus left, but in that sterile exam room, watching my daughter dance on the grainy screen, I felt tears slide down my temples. "She's strong," Dr. Patel commented, pointing to the steady thrum of her heartbeat. "Just like her mother." I clung to those words as I left the appointment, the ultrasound images safely tucked into my purse. Strong. I needed to be strong, stronger than I'd ever been before. That evening, I received the email I'd been both hoping for and dreading, a response from EmergeTech, one of Seattle's most prestigious startup accelerators. They wanted me to pitch to their selection committee, in person, in 2 weeks. I stared at the screen, simultaneously elated and terrified. This was my chance, perhaps my only chance, to secure the seed funding and mentorship I needed to turn my concept into reality. But I was nearly 5 months pregnant, a fact impossible to hide. Would they take me seriously? Would they see a desperate single mother rather than a driven entrepreneur? My finger hovered over the reply button, doubt creeping in around the edges of my determination. I'd been surviving on sheer momentum since Marcus left, but now the magnitude of what I was attempting crashed over me. Starting a business was hard enough for anyone. The statistics were grim. Over 90% of startups failed. Add in single motherhood, no safety net, and a ticking clock that gave me mere months before my life would be consumed by midnight feedings and diaper changes, the odds seemed insurmountable. For the first time since that night Marcus walked out, I allowed myself to consider the easier path. I could stay in my secure, if uninspiring, marketing job with its decent health insurance and maternity leave. I could move to a smaller apartment, find reliable childcare, and build a modest but stable life for my daughter. The rational part of my brain knew this was the safer option. But something deeper, something that had awakened the night Marcus told me I wasn't CEO material, rebelled against settling for just enough. My phone buzzed with a text message, jarring me from my thoughts. It was from Zoe, a former colleague who'd left our marketing firm a year ago to join a successful startup. "Did I see your name on the EmergeTech interview list? Tell me that's you." The message read. I smiled despite myself. Zoe had been one of the few people I'd shared my business idea with before everything imploded. She'd believed in it, and in me, from the beginning. "It's me," I texted back. "Not sure if I'm ready." Her response came immediately. "Of course you're not ready. No one ever is. Do it anyway." I stared at those words, so simple yet so powerful. Do it anyway. Wasn't that what I'd been telling myself every morning when I dragged my exhausted body out of bed? Wasn't that how I'd made it through the past 6 weeks? By doing what needed to be done, ready or not? I clicked reply on the EmergeTech email and confirmed my pitch slot. Then I opened my presentation and got back to work. I had 2 weeks to perfect my pitch, to prove that I was more than Marcus's assessment of me, more than a soon-to-be single mother in over her head. 2 days later, I was organizing my research notes when a notification popped up on my phone, an Instagram tag from someone I didn't follow. Curious, I tapped it open, then immediately wished I hadn't. There was Marcus, arm around a slender blonde I recognized as Vanessa, a developer from his office, the woman he'd left me for. They stood in front of a sold sign outside a Craftsman bungalow, grinning as if they'd won the lottery. The caption read, "New chapter, new home with this amazing woman. Blessed Chach new beginnings." The phone slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, clattering to the floor. I made no move to pick it up. While I'd been figuring out how to make rent on a single income and afford prenatal vitamins, Marcus had been house hunting with his girlfriend. While I'd been lying awake calculating childcare costs, he'd been building the life he actually wanted, the one that didn't include his own daughter, The rage that surged through me was so intense it left me breathless. This wasn't the dull ache of abandonment anymore. This was white-hot fury at the injustice of it all, at how easily he'd transitioned to his new life, how thoroughly he'd erased his responsibilities. When I could breathe again, I retrieved my phone and blocked his account. Then I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do yet. I deleted every photo of us, every remnant of our 3 years together from my phone and social media. I wasn't going to waste another minute looking back at what I'd lost. Instead, I channeled that anger into my pitch preparation. Each slide became a silent rebuttal to Marcus's dismissal. Each financial projection, each careful analysis of market opportunity was proof that he had underestimated me in every possible way. The night before my Emerge Tech pitch, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, practicing my delivery one last time. My blazer was carefully tailored to accommodate my growing belly, my presentation polished to a perfect shine. But the woman staring back at me from the mirror was hardly recognizable. Gone was the eager-to-please marketing coordinator who had accepted Marcus's casual undermining of her dreams. In her place stood someone harder, more focused, with a glint of steel in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "My name is Eliza Bennett," I said in my reflection, "and I'm about to change the way small businesses connect with talent." I rested my hand on my stomach, feeling my daughter's now familiar flutter of movement. "And no one," I whispered, "will ever tell either of us what we can't do again." The Emerge Tech offices occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming downtown Seattle high-rise, all glass and brushed steel with panoramic views of Elliott Bay. I arrived 30 minutes early, unwilling to risk even a second of tardiness. The receptionist directed me to a small conference room where other hopeful entrepreneurs waited, each of us trying not to look as nervous as we felt. I was the only visibly pregnant person in the room, and the only woman. As I settled into one of the minimalist chairs, I felt the weight of curious glances. The tech world's gender imbalance wasn't news to me. I'd navigated it throughout my marketing career, but I'd never felt it quite so acutely. 6 men in various iterations of the startup uniform, expensive jeans, button-downs, designer sneakers, eyed me with expressions ranging from polite curiosity to barely disguised skepticism. First time pitching? The question came from the man beside me, who looked barely old enough to have graduated college. His casual confidence suggested he'd done this before. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, forcing a smile. He shrugged. "Everyone's nervous for the first time. I'm Damon, by the way. This is my 3rd accelerator. First 2 startups didn't make it past seed funding, but this one's the winner." He tapped his tablet. "Cryptocurrency trading platform with AI-driven market predictions." "Eliza," I introduced myself. "Freelance talent matching platform for small businesses." "Interesting space," he nodded, though his tone suggested he found it considerably less exciting than cryptocurrency. His eyes flickered to my stomach, then quickly away. "So, when are you—" "Due in 4 months, I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Just in time for demo day if we get selected." He blinked, clearly trying to process this information. "That's some timing. It wasn't exactly planned this way," I admitted, "but I'm making it work." Before he could respond, the door opened, and a woman with a clipboard appeared. "Damon Chen, you're up first." He stood straightening his shoulders. "Good luck," he said to me, seeming to mean it. "You too." As Damon disappeared through the door, I pulled out my tablet and reviewed my slides one last time. The facts and figures were solid. I knew my market. I understood the problem I was solving. But would the panel see past my pregnancy to the viable business beneath? One by one, the other entrepreneurs were called in. Each returned looking either cautiously optimistic or utterly defeated. Finally, my name was called. The main conference room was intimidating, a long table surrounded by 8 people, each with laptops open in front of them. At the center sat Vivian Torres, EmergeTech's founder and a legend in the Seattle startup scene. Her critical gaze sized me up as I connected my tablet to the presentation screen. "You have 12 minutes for your pitch," she said without preamble. "Then we'll have 8 minutes for questions. Begin when you're ready." I took a deep breath, centering myself. Then I launched into the pitch I'd rehearsed until I could recite it in my sleep. "Small businesses are the backbone of our economy, but they're being failed by current freelance platforms," I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "These businesses waste an average of 15 hours per project sorting through unqualified applicants and freelancers, waste similar time applying for jobs they're unlikely to get. My platform, SkillMatch, solves this problem through industry-specific matching algorithms that connect businesses with freelancers who have verifiable experience in their exact field." I moved through my slides with practiced precision, walking them through market size, revenue model, competitive analysis, and growth projections. I demonstrated the prototype I'd built, showing how a restaurant owner looking for social media help would be matched only with freelancers who had proven experience in food service marketing, not just generic social media skills. As I spoke, I could see interest kindling in several panel members' eyes. Even Vivian's stern expression had softened slightly. No one seemed to be staring at my baby bump anymore. They were focused on my screens, my numbers, my vision, until the questions began. "Your technical solution is impressive," began an older man at the end of the table. "But I'm concerned about your ability to execute given your—" He paused, searching for the appropriate word. "Personal situation. Building a startup is all-consuming. Do you have the bandwidth for both a newborn and a new company?" There it was, the question I'd been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. "Appreciate your concern," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "I've developed a detailed operational plan for the first year that accounts for my daughter's arrival. I've secured agreements with 2 senior developers who will join full-time upon funding, and I've arranged a flexible childcare solution with my neighbor, a retired nurse who's eager to help." I pulled up a slide I'd prepared but hadn't planned, to show unless necessary, a timeline that mapped out product development milestones alongside my maternity recovery. As you can see, I've built in contingencies for every stage. I'm not approaching this naively. Being a single mother isn't a liability for this business. It's actually part of why I'm uniquely positioned to make it succeed. I understand firsthand the need for flexible work arrangements and the untapped talent pool they can access. Vivian leaned forward, her interest visibly piqued. "You're a single parent?" I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Yes. It wasn't my original plan, but I've adapted." "So this is personal for you," she stated rather than asked. "The business model is based on market opportunity and solid data," I clarified, unwilling to be dismissed as an emotional investment. "But yes, I understand the value of flexible work on a personal level." Vivian's lips curved slightly. "Sometimes the most successful businesses come from solving our own problems." The questions continued, probing my financial projections, my customer acquisition strategy, my technical infrastructure. I answered each one confidently, revealing the depth of research and planning I'd done. By the time my 20 minutes were up, the energy in the room had shifted noticeably. "Thank you, Ms. Bennett," Vivian said as I gathered my things. "We'll be in touch within a week." I nodded, thanked them for their time, and walked out with my head high, though my knees felt like jelly once I reached the hall. I'd done it. Whether they selected me or not, I'd stood my ground and presented my vision without apology or qualification. Outside the building, the crisp autumn air felt glorious after the tension of the conference room. I allowed myself a moment of celebration, buying an overpriced smoothie from a nearby cafe and sitting in a patch of sunlight to savor it. Whatever happened next, I had taken control of my narrative. I wasn't just reacting to Marcus's abandonment anymore. I was actively building something new. My moment of peace was interrupted by my phone ringing. The caller ID showed my landlord's name. an unusual occurrence that immediately set off warning bells. "Hello, Mr. Delaney," I answered, trying to keep the concern from my voice. "Eliza," his gravelly voice came through. "I'm calling about your lease renewal. Got some bad news, I'm afraid." My stomach dropped. "What kind of bad news?" "Building's been sold. New owners are converting to luxury condos. Everyone's got 90 days to find new places." I nearly dropped my smoothie. 90 days? But that's, I know, right before Christmas. Terrible timing. I fought him on it, but there's nothing I can do. They're offering a month's rent as compensation, but you'll still need to be out by December 31st. December 31st. 8 months pregnant and homeless for the holidays. Just when I thought I'd handled everything Marcus's departure had thrown at me, the universe decided to add another challenge. "Thank you for letting me know," I managed to say, my mind already racing through limited options. Seattle's rental market was brutal. Studios went for what I used to pay for our one-bedroom, and prices kept climbing. Finding something affordable on a single income, with enough space for a baby, in a safe neighborhood, in just 90 days. It seemed impossible. As I hung up, a notification from my banking app flashed across my screen. Automatic payment failed. I opened it with a growing sense of dread. My car insurance payment had bounced. A quick check of my account confirmed what I'd been trying to ignore. My safety net was nearly gone. Between the prototype development costs, the tailored maternity work clothes for interviews, and the medical bills my insurance didn't cover, my savings had dwindled to dangerously low levels. I sat on that bench, sunshine suddenly feeling less warm, overwhelmed by the cascade of obstacles. For a brief, terrible moment, I considered calling Marcus, not to reconcile, but simply to demand the financial support our child deserved. But the thought of his smug face, of giving him any power over our lives again, steeled my resolve. I would find another way. I always did. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email notification. The sender was Vivian Torres. My heart hammered as I opened it, certain it was too soon for a decision from Emerge Tech. The message was brief. "Eliza, I was impressed by your pitch today. Are you free for coffee tomorrow morning? I'd like to discuss your business model further." Vivian, I read it 3 times, hardly daring to believe it. A personal meeting with Vivian Torres wasn't a guarantee of selection, but it was certainly promising. Maybe, just maybe, the tide was starting to turn. I typed my response with trembling fingers, confirming that I could meet her at the cafe she suggested. Then I gathered my things and headed for the bus stop, my mind calculating and recalculating my budget. If the building was being sold, perhaps I could negotiate an earlier exit in exchange for a larger compensation package. The money could cover a deposit on a new place. If Emerge Tech selected me, the stipend would help with living expenses. If they didn't, well, I'd face that if it happened. As the bus carried me back to my soon-to-be former home, I felt my daughter kick, a strong, decisive moment that made me smile despite everything. "We're going to figure this out," I promised her quietly. "One problem at a time." The elderly woman beside me smiled, misunderstanding my whispered words as a general expression of pregnancy wonder. "First baby?" she asked kindly. I nodded, returning her smile. "Yes, a little girl." "There's nothing stronger than a mother's love," she said with the confidence of experience. "You'll move mountains for her." Mountains, eviction notices, failed payments, and skeptical investors. I'd move them all if I had to. The path ahead wasn't clear yet, but I'd find a way forward. For both of us. The cafe Vivian had chosen was tucked away on a side street in the South Lake Union District, far from the corporate coffee chains that dotted downtown. It was an unassuming place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, but judging by the line stretching to the door, they took their coffee seriously. I arrived 15 minutes early, a habit ingrained from years of trying to prove myself in corporate environments. Despite my punctuality, Vivian was already there, occupying a small table by the window, 2 steaming mugs in front of her. "Mint tea," she said as I approached, gesturing to one of the mugs. "I figured coffee might not be ideal in your condition." The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught me off guard. "Thank you," I said, settling into the chair across from her. "That's very considerate." Vivian Torres didn't look like most tech executives I'd encountered. In her early 50s, she wore her silver-streaked hair in a short, practical cut, and her outfit, dark jeans, a simple blouse, and a well-worn leather jacket, spoke of practicality rather than power. But her reputation in the industry was legendary. After selling her second startup to Google for 9 figures, she'd devoted herself to nurturing the next generation of entrepreneurs through Emerge Tech. "I'll get straight to the point," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "Your pitch yesterday was impressive. Clean problem statement, solid market analysis, clear revenue model. But what caught my attention wasn't on your slides." I tensed slightly, mentally preparing for another comment about my pregnancy. "It was your adaptability," she continued, surprising me. "When questioned about your personal circumstances, you didn't get defensive or make excuses. You showed us a contingency plan that demonstrated you've thought through the challenges realistically." She leaned forward, her dark eyes intent. "That's rare, Eliza. Most founders come in with blind optimism and get rattled at the first hint of skepticism. You've clearly faced some significant obstacles already, but you've turned them into strategic thinking." "I've had to," I admitted. "The past few months haven't left much room for blind optimism." A hint of a smile crossed her face. "The panel is still deliberating on the cohort selections, but regardless of that outcome, I wanted to meet with you personally because your situation resonates with me." She paused, seeming to consider how much to share. 23 years ago, I was launching my first startup while going through a messy divorce. My ex-husband told everyone in our industry that I was too emotionally unstable to run a company. Her expression hardened at the memory. 2 years later, I sold that company for $12 million. My eyes widened. This wasn't part of the Vivian Torres origin story that circulated in tech circles. "The thing is," she continued, "I nearly didn't make it through those first 6 months. Not because I lacked ability, but because I lacked support. No one wanted to invest in a newly divorced woman with something to prove." She took another sip of her coffee. "I'm telling you this because I see something familiar in you. That same determination, that same clarity of purpose born from necessity. But I don't want your path to be as unnecessarily difficult as mine was." My pulse quickened. Was she implying what I thought she was? "Are you offering me a spot in the accelerator?" I asked cautiously. Vivian shook her head. "That's not my decision alone, and the committee won't finalize selections until next week. What I'm offering is mentorship, regardless of whether Emerge Tech selects your company." I stared at her, stunned. Mentorship from Vivian Torres was arguably more valuable than the accelerator spot itself. "Why?" I finally managed to ask. "Why me?" "Let's call it paying it forward," she replied. "Or perhaps strategic self-interest. Women in tech need to support each other, and your concept has genuine merit. I'd rather see it succeed with my help than fail without it." She pulled a card from her pocket and slid it across the table. "This is my personal number. Use it if you need guidance, connections, or just someone who understands the unique challenges you're facing." I picked up the card, feeling its weight. Heavy cardstock, minimalist design, just her name and number. It represented a lifeline I hadn't dared hope for. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "Thank you seems inadequate." "Don't thank me yet," she said, her tone turning practical. "Building a company while building a family is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. Some days you'll want to quit both." Her expression softened slightly. "But speaking from experience, it can also be the most rewarding." She glanced at her watch. I have another meeting, but before I go, what's your most pressing challenge right now? Besides waiting for the accelerator decision. The question caught me off guard with its directness. My instinct was to project confidence, to minimize my struggles as I'd been doing with everyone else. But something about Vivian's frank acknowledgement of her own past difficulties made me answer honestly. Housing, I said. My building was just sold. I have 90 days to find a new place, which means I'll be moving at 8 months pregnant during the holidays in one of the country's most expensive rental markets. Vivian frowned. That's not ideal timing. That's putting it mildly, I agreed with a wry smile. She was quiet for a moment, thinking, I may know someone with a rental property in Fremont. It's not fancy, but it's a 2-bedroom in a good neighborhood. I could make an introduction. That would be incredible, I said, fighting the sudden tightness in my throat. After months of solving every problem alone, the simple offer of help felt overwhelming. Consider it done. She stood, gathering her things. I'll email you the details. And Eliza? The committee will make their decision soon. But remember, accelerator or not, you have what it takes to make this work. With that, she was gone, leaving me sitting with my cooling tea and a renewed sense of possibility. I fingered the edge of her business card, still processing what had just happened. For the first time since Marcus walked out, I felt like I wasn't completely alone in this journey. 3 days later, I stood in front of a charming craftsman-style house in Fremont, triple-checking the address Vivian had sent. The quiet residential, street lined with mature trees, was a far cry from my downtown apartment building. This couldn't possibly be a rental within my budget. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Before I could reconsider, the front door opened, revealing a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and paint-splattered overalls. You must be Eliza, she called, waving me forward. Vivian said you'd be stopping by. I'm Eleanor. I made my way up the path, taking in the well-tended garden and colorful wind chimes hanging from the porch. It's lovely to meet you, I said, extending my hand. This is a beautiful home. Oh, we're not looking at the main house, Eleanor corrected, with a smile. That's where I live. The rental is around back. I converted the garage into a garden apartment when my son was in college. Come on, I'll show you. I followed her around the side of the house, through a gate that opened into a lush backyard. At the far end stood what had indeed once been a garage, but was now a charming small structure with large windows and a private entrance. It's about 800 square feet, Eleanor explained as she unlocked the door. 1 bedroom, plus a small second. Room that could work as a nursery. Vivian mentioned what you're expecting. The interior was simple but immaculate. Polished concrete floors, white walls, and large windows that filled the space with natural light. The main area served as both living room and kitchen, with modern appliances and built-in shelving. A short hallway led to a surprisingly spacious bathroom and 2 modest bedrooms, the smaller of which had clearly been used as a home office. It's perfect, I breathed, trying not to get my hopes up. But I'm guessing it's out of my price range. Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. Vivian explained your situation. I'm more interested in having a good tenant than charging market rate. Besides, I like having a young family nearby. It gets quiet around here. She named a figure that was actually less than what I was currently paying for my 1-bedroom downtown. I stared at her in disbelief. That can't be right, I said before. I could stop myself. In this neighborhood? Eleanor chuckled. The house has been paid off for decades, dear. I'm not trying to make a profit, just cover the utilities and taxes. Renting to a responsible adult who happens to be friends with Vivian Torres is worth more to me than an extra few $100s a month. Friends with Vivian Torres. The phrase struck me as absurdly generous, but I wasn't about to correct her. When would you need to move in? She asked. Ideally by mid-December, I replied. Before the holidays and before I get any bigger. I gestured to my growing belly with a self-deprecating smile. That works perfectly. My current tenant leaves November 30th. She handed me a rental application. Fill this out, and as long as your references check out, the place is yours. I clutched the paper like it was a winning lottery ticket. After the relentless stream of setbacks, this unexpected stroke of good fortune felt almost suspicious. I don't know how to thank you and Vivian for this opportunity. Eleanor's expression softened. You know, I was a single mother too. My husband left when my son was 2. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most rewarding. She nodded toward my belly. Boy or girl? Girl, I said, unable to suppress my smile. Perfect. Girls need to see what strength looks like, Eleanor said with a firm nod. Now, let's go inside for some tea and you can tell me more about this business you're starting. Vivian mentioned it's some kind of tech platform. As I followed Eleanor toward her house, my phone buzzed with an email notification. I glanced at it quickly, then stopped in my tracks, a gasp escaping before I could contain it. Everything okay? Eleanor asked, turning back with concern. I looked up, my vision blurring slightly with unexpected tears. Yes, everything's wonderful, actually. I just got accepted into the Emerge Tech Accelerator program. Eleanor's face broke into a wide smile. Well now, that calls for something stronger than tea, doesn't it? I think I have a bottle of sparkling cider we can use to celebrate. As we walked toward her house, I felt a strange sensation wash over me, not just relief or happiness, but something deeper. For the first time since Marcus's betrayal, I wasn't merely surviving. I was starting to build something real, a home, a business, a future. My daughter kicked energetically, as if sharing in my excitement. I know, I whispered, placing my hand over the spot. Things are finally looking up. Little did I know that the most difficult challenge was still to come, one that would force me to confront not just external obstacles, but the lingering wounds that Marcus had left behind. The Emerge Tech offices became my second home over the next few weeks. Each morning, I joined the other 9 startups selected for the cohort in collaborative workspaces overlooking the city. The energy was electric, a mix of ambition, innovation, and the distinct pressure that comes with having 3 months to transform an idea into a viable business. As the only pregnant founder in the program, I attracted curious glances at first. But those quickly faded as we all became consumed by the grueling pace of development. Emerge Tech's accelerator name wasn't just clever branding. Everything about the program was intensified and compressed. We had weekly milestones, daily mentoring sessions, and constant pressure to iterate, pivot, and perfect our concepts before demo day. I thrived on it. After months of working alone at my kitchen table, the structure and resources felt like oxygen to a suffocating person. I had access to top developers, design experts, and mentors who helped refine my platform's interface and matching algorithms. The $50,000 seed investment that came with the program allowed me to hire a small development team, 2 talented programmers who believed in my vision enough to accept partial payment in equity. My days started at 5 a.m. with prenatal yoga, a concession to my doctor who warned me about stress levels during pregnancy, followed by 12 hours of intense work interspersed with investor meetings, user testing sessions, and technical consultations. I usually arrived home to Eleanor's garden apartment around 8 p.m., exhausted but exhilarated by the tangible progress we were making. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Eleanor commented one evening, as she spotted me waddling up the garden path. My laptop bag slung over one shoulder and takeout dinner in the other hand. She had taken to leaving her porch light on for me, a small gesture that always warmed my heart. "The accelerator only runs for 12 weeks, I explained, pausing at her gate. "I need to make every day count." She frowned, the concern evident in her lined face. "That baby of yours doesn't care about accelerator timelines, dear. She'll come when she's ready." "That's why I'm working so hard now," I said, patting my 7-month belly. We're nearly finished with the beta version. Once it's launched, I can afford to slow down a bit. Eleanor didn't look convinced, but she nodded. At least let me send over some proper dinner. You can't live on those takeout containers. I started to protest, but stopped myself. Learning to accept help was still new to me, a skill I was consciously developing. That would be wonderful, thank you. That night, after devouring Eleanor's homemade lasagna, infinitely better than the sad salad I'd picked up, I sat cross-legged on my bed, surrounded by user testing reports. SkillMatch's beta launch was scheduled for the following week, a soft release to 50 small businesses and 100 pre-screened freelancers. If all went well, we'd expand to full launch just before demo day. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe, who had become an unofficial advisor to SkillMatch. Just saw the final beta interface. It's gorgeous. You're going to crush this launch. I smiled, sending back a quick thank you. Zoe's enthusiasm had been a constant source of encouragement, especially on days when pregnancy exhaustion collided with startup stress. She'd even volunteered to help organize the beta testing pool, leveraging her contacts in the Seattle tech community. I was about to return to my reports when another message appeared, this one from Vivian. How are you feeling about Tuesday's launch? Need anything from me? Vivian's mentorship had proven even more valuable than I'd anticipated. While she maintained professional boundaries with all the cohort founders during program hours, she'd made good on her promise of additional support. Our weekly coffee meetings had become a highlight, a chance to discuss not just business strategy, but the personal challenges of my unique situation. Nervous, but ready, I texted back. The team did incredible work on the final UI improvements. Her response came quickly. Nervousness is appropriate. It means you care. Get some sleep tonight. You'll need your energy for launch week. Sleep. It seemed like a distant memory. Between my growing daughter's nocturnal acrobatics and my racing mind, quality rest had become elusive. Still, I knew Vivian was right. I closed my laptop, organized my notes for the morning, and performed my nightly ritual of talking to my daughter as I applied cocoa butter to my stretched skin. Just a few more months, little one, I told her as she pressed what felt like a foot against my ribs. By the time you arrive, SkillMatch will be up and running, and we'll have a real shot at this crazy plan. As if in response, she delivered a particularly enthusiastic kick. I laughed, interpreting it as approval. I'll take that as a yes vote. Launch day arrived with the crisp clarity of a perfect Seattle autumn morning. The team gathered early at IG Emerge Tech, the nervous energy palpable as our lead developer, Raj, prepared to deploy the beta version. Final checks complete, he announced, his fingers poised over the keyboard. Ready to go live? I took a deep breath, acutely aware that this moment represented months of work, sacrifice, and determination. Do it. With a few keystrokes, SkillMatch Beta was alive. The team erupted in restrained cheers, restrained because we all knew this was just the beginning. Now came the real test. Would actual users find value in our platform? We'd prepared a detailed monitoring dashboard to track every interaction, from signups to matches to completed projects. For the first hour, we all huddled around the screens, watching the numbers tick up as our beta users received their access emails and began exploring the platform. First sign in, called out Maya, our UI designer, as the dashboard registered. Activity. And another 5 more. They're coming in. By mid-morning, 37 of our 50 businesses had logged in, and 63 freelancers had completed their detailed skill profiles. The real magic would happen when the matching algorithm began connecting them based on specific industry, experience, and verified skills. First match request submitted, Raj announced around noon, triggering another round of celebration. Business ID 12 is looking for an e-commerce copywriter with fashion industry experience. We watched in collective anticipation as the algorithm processed the request, comparing it against our freelancer database. Moments later, the system returned 3 potential matches, ranked by relevance. It works, I whispered, a lump forming in my throat as I watched our creation performing exactly as designed. It actually works. Vivian appeared at my side, having quietly entered during the excitement. Of course it works, she said with a small smile. You built it. The rest of launch day passed in a blur of monitoring, minor bug fixes, and cautiously optimistic progress reports. By evening, we had 15 active project negotiations happening on the platform. Businesses and freelancers discussing details, sharing portfolios, and moving toward agreements. This is just the beta group, Maya reminded us as we gathered. For a quick champagne toast, sparkling water for me, at the end of the day. Imagine what happens when we open to the public. I allowed myself to imagine it. Thousands of small businesses finding exactly the talent they needed without wasting time and resources. Freelancers connect with opportunities perfectly suited to their specific skills. The vision that had sustained me through the darkest days after Marcus left was becoming tangible reality. As the team dispersed, Vivian lingered behind. You should be proud, she said. Many founders never make it to this point. We still have a long way to go, I cautioned, ever aware of the precarious nature of startups. True, she acknowledged. But take a moment to appreciate this milestone. You've overcome more obstacles than most to get here. I nodded, allowing the satisfaction to settle in. Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me yet, she replied with her characteristic directness. Demo day is still 6 weeks away, and that's when the real work begins. Investors will be watching, and your competition won't be limited to this cohort. I know. We'll be ready. She studied me for a moment. You've done the impossible, Eliza. You've built a promising company while growing as a human being, but the next month is critical for both. Promise me you'll pace yourself. I'll try, I offered, knowing it was the most honest answer I could give. Vivian seemed to accept this. Good enough. Now go home and get some rest. Tomorrow we start preparing. Your investor pitch. The following week brought our first real challenge. A competing platform, one that had been in development for over a year with significant venture backing, announced their public launch. Their model wasn't identical to ours, but the overlap was substantial enough to concern our team. They have a 15-month head start and $5 million in funding, Raj pointed out during our emergency strategy meeting. Their platform already has hundreds of reviews. But their matching is generic, Maya countered, pulling up their website. They're not focusing on industry-specific expertise like we are. It's just another broad marketplace. I studied their interface, noting the similarities and differences. We need to emphasize our differentiator more clearly, I decided. Our entire value proposition is the quality of matches based on verified industry experience. Let's double down on that in all our messaging. The team nodded, energized rather than defeated by the competition. We spent the next 3 days refining our onboarding process to highlight our specialized matching, updated our marketing materials, and reached out personally to our beta users for feedback. The response was encouraging. Our early users consistently praised the quality of matches they received, with several reporting they'd found perfect collaborators on their first try, something that had never happened on generic platforms. This is exactly what makes SkillMatch special, I told the team as we reviewed the feedback. We're not trying to be everything to everyone. We're solving a specific problem better than anyone else. As we refined our approach in response to the competition, I found myself thinking about Marcus for the first time in weeks. His dismissive assessment of my potential seemed absurd now as I led a talented team through a critical pivot. I wondered briefly what he would think if he could see me now, then realized with quiet satisfaction that I no longer cared. My focus had shifted entirely to the future, to demo day, to my daughter's impending arrival, to the company I was building. Marcus belonged to the past, a chapter closed and largely forgotten, or so I thought. until the day his name appeared in my professional inbox, attached to a job application for SkillMatch's newly posted customer success position. I stared at the email notification, certain I was hallucinating from pregnancy hormones and exhaustion. Marcus Reed. The name jumped out from my screen like an accusation, like a ghost materializing from my past. My finger hovered over the delete button, the instinctive response to anything associated with him. But professional curiosity overcame personal aversion. What possible reason could Marcus have for applying to my company? Did he even know it was my company? The customer success position had been posted through EmergeTech's job board, with applications directed to a generic HR email. Perhaps it was just a bizarre coincidence. I opened the application with trepidation, half expecting to see a different Marcus Reed, a common enough name that could belong to any number of qualified applicants. But the resume that loaded on my screen was unmistakably his. The same education history, the same early career positions I'd helped him format years ago. What shocked me more than his application was his current employment status. According to his resume, Marcus was no longer at the prestigious tech firm where he'd worked during our relationship. Instead, he listed a series of short-term contracts over the past year, each progressively less impressive than the last. His most recent position was a 3-month customer service role at a struggling startup that I knew had recently laid off half its staff. I pushed back from my desk, my mind racing. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. He must know SkillMatch. Was my company. But why apply? To apologize? To spy? To sabotage? None of these explanations aligned with the Marcus I knew, a man who avoided confrontation and emotional complexity at all costs. "Everything okay?" Maya asked, glancing up from by her desk across our shared workspace at EmergeTech. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," I murmured, closing the email. "Just an unexpected job applicant." Maya returned to her work, but I couldn't focus. The application had disturbed something I thought I'd put to rest. The lingering questions about why Marcus had really left. Why he'd been so cold, so final in his rejection of not just me, but our child. I'd stopped asking these questions months ago, channeling all that energy into building SkillMatch instead. Now they came flooding back, unwelcome and distracting. I needed perspective, someone who could view this situation objectively. I texted, "Vivian, free for coffee this afternoon?" Something unexpected came up. Her response was immediate. 3 p.m. usual place. With that appointment set, I forced myself to compartmentalize. We had a platform to build, investors to impress, and only 5 weeks until demo day. Marcus Reed's sudden reappearance could wait. He applied for a job at SkillMatch? Vivian's eyebrows shot up in surprise as she set down her coffee cup. That's either supremely confident or supremely stupid. Or desperate, I added, stirring my tea absently. His resume shows a pretty clear downward trajectory over the past year. Vivian leaned back, studying me. The question isn't why he applied. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I sighed, having spent the past few hours cycling through my options. The rational choice is to just reject the application and move on. We have plenty of qualified candidates, and hiring him would obviously be complicated. But, Vivian prompted, hearing the hesitation in my voice, but I can't stop wondering why. Why now? Why my company? Does he even know I'm the founder? I shook my head, frustrated by my own curiosity. Part of me wants to interview him just to see his face when he realizes. A slow smile spread across Vivian's face. Now that would be interesting. Also unprofessional and potentially disastrous, I countered. Perhaps, she conceded. Or perhaps it's an opportunity for closure. You've been focused on moving forward, admirably. But have you truly processed what happened with him? The question hit uncomfortably close to home. I'd been so determined to prove Marcus wrong, to build something successful despite his abandonment, that I'd pushed aside the actual emotional work of healing. Not really, I admitted. There hasn't been time. Vivian nodded, unsurprised. That's the entrepreneur's classic excuse. Trust me, I've used it myself. But speaking from experience, unresolved personal issues have a way of affecting business decisions, especially when the two are as intertwined as they are in your case. So, you think I should interview him? I asked, still uncertain. I think you should do whatever allows you to move forward with the least amount of lingering baggage, she said carefully. If that means interviewing him to satisfy your curiosity, do it. If it means deleting his application and never thinking of him again, do that. She paused, her expression softening slightly. But remember, Eliza, you're not just making decisions for yourself anymore. You're leading a company, and in a few weeks you'll be parenting a child. What example do you want to set? It was a perspective I hadn't considered. What would I tell my daughter someday about how I handled this situation? Would I want her to know I'd run from the confrontation, or that I'd faced it with dignity and professionalism? I'll sleep on it, I promised Vivian. Thank you for the perspective. Sleep, however, proved elusive. I tossed and turned, my daughter, seemingly just as restless, her movements more pronounced than usual, as if she too sensed my unease. Around 2 a.m., I gave up and moved to the small living room of my garden apartment, making a cup of chamomile tea and pulling up Marcus's application, again on my laptop. I studied his resume more carefully this time, noting the gaps and inconsistencies. He'd left his previous firm about 6 months after walking out on me, roughly the time his face had appeared in that Instagram post with the sold sign and his new girlfriend. Has something gone wrong with his perfect new life? Had the girlfriend left him? Had the house fallen through? I shouldn't care, I told myself firmly. His problems weren't mine anymore. I had a business to run, a baby to prepare for, a future to build that had nothing to do with him. But as I sat there in the quiet darkness, I remembered something my mother had told me shortly before she died. Curiosity isn't a weakness, Eliza. It's how we learn and grow. Don't ignore the questions that keep you awake at night. By morning, I had made my decision. I forwarded Marcus's application to Raj with a note. This candidate has relevant experience. Let's include him in the first round of interviews. I didn't mention our history. I didn't need to. If Marcus made it through Raj's technical screening, I would face him myself in the final interview, and then perhaps I would finally get answers to those middle-of-the-night questions. The next week passed in a blur of pitch preparations, user feedback integration, and the 100 daily details of running a startup. I deliberately pushed thoughts of Marcus aside, focusing instead on refining our platform based on beta user suggestions. The improvements were substantial. We streamlined the matching algorithm, enhanced the project management tools, and added a robust feedback system that helped freelancers build industry-specific portfolios. Raj had scheduled the first round of customer success interviews for Thursday, and I purposely avoided asking if Marcus had made the cut. I didn't want that knowledge distracting me from more important matters. On Wednesday afternoon, as I was reviewing our latest metrics dashboard, Raj stopped by my desk with a printout. Final interview candidates for tomorrow, he said, handing me the sheet. 3 strong options, all with relevant experience. I've scheduled them back-to-back starting at 1 p.m. I scanned the list, my heart skipping when I saw Marcus's name as the final interview at 3 p.m. He had made it through the technical screening. Tomorrow, I would face him for the first time in 8 months. 8 months that had transformed me. From a heartbroken pregnant woman into the CEO of a promising startup. These look good, I said, keeping my voice steady. Thanks for handling the first rounds. Raj nodded, hesitating slightly. That last candidate, Reed, seemed familiar somehow. Have we met him before? I considered telling Raj the truth, then decided against it. The fewer people who knew about my history with Marcus, the better. He might have attended one of the Emerge Tech networking events, I suggested. Raj accepted this explanation and moved on, but the interaction left me uneasy. Was I making a mistake by allowing this interview to happen? Was I letting personal curiosity override professional judgment? That evening, I called Zoe, the one person besides Vivian who knew the full story of my relationship with Marcus. "He's actually going to interview you?" she gasped after I explained the situation. "That's either incredible boldness or incredible stupidity." "That's almost exactly what Vivian said," I replied with a rueful laugh. "Great minds," Zoe quipped. "But seriously, Eliza, are you okay with this? You don't owe him a minute of your time after what he did." "I know," I said, absently rubbing my belly as my daughter kicked. "But I think I need this. Not for closure, I've moved on, but to face this final piece of the past before I start the next chapter." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Zoe affirmed. "Just promise me you'll be careful. Men like Marcus don't change their stripes, and I don't want to see him hurt you again." "He can't," I said with surprising certainty. "He has no power over me anymore." As we said our goodbyes, I realized the truth in my words. The woman Marcus had abandoned, insecure, dependent, desperate for his approval, no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had rebuilt her life, from the ground up on her own terms. Tomorrow's interview wasn't about giving Marcus another chance or seeking revenge. It was about facing the past without flinching, about proving to myself that I had truly moved beyond it. With that resolution firmly in mind, I prepared for bed, reviewing interview questions and mentally rehearsing how I would greet him, professionally, distantly, with the polite interest I'd show any candidate. No anger, no hurt, no personal connection. Just business. As I drifted off to sleep, one last thought surfaced. What would his face look like when he realized exactly whose company he was applying to join? That, at least, promised to be interesting. Interview day arrived with a strange sense of inevitability. I went through my morning routine with mechanical precision: prenatal vitamins, light breakfast, comfortable yet professional maternity outfit carefully selected the night before. At nearly 8 months pregnant, my wardrobe options were limited, but I'd invested in a few power pieces for important meetings. Today, I certainly qualified. As I dressed, I caught my reflection in the mirror, the rounded belly stretching the fabric of my charcoal dress, the subtle changes in my face, the determined set of my jaw. Marcus would be seeing a very different woman than the one he'd left behind. I arrived at Emerge Tech early, reviewing the resumes of all 3 candidates one last time and preparing my notes. The first 2 interviews went smoothly. Both applicants were qualified, enthusiastic about our mission, and politely curious about my pregnancy without being intrusive. Under normal circumstances, either would have been a strong contender for the position, but these weren't normal circumstances. At precisely 2:55 p.m., Raj appeared at my office door. "Last candidate is here," he said. "Want me to bring him in?" Took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Give me 2 minutes, then send him in." After Raj left, I stood and moved to the window, gathering my thoughts. I had rehearsed this moment countless times over the past 24 hours. How I would greet Marcus with professional detachment, how I would conduct the interview without acknowledging our history until the end, how I would remain perfectly composed throughout. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I turned, straightened my shoulders, and said, "Come in." The door opened, and there he was. Marcus Reed, the man who had shared my bed, my home, my plans for the future, and then walked away when those plans included a child. He looked different than I remembered. Thinner, paler, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous tension in his movements that hadn't been there before. His once expensive haircut had grown out, and his button-down shirt, while clean, showed signs of wear at the collar. For a split second, he didn't recognize me. His eyes passed over my face with the polite attentiveness of a job candidate meeting a potential employer. Then awareness dawned, his expression shifting from professional interest to shocked disbelief in the span of a heartbeat. "Eliza?" He breathed, his voice barely audible. I allowed myself one moment to savor his shock, then gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Mr. Reed, please, have a seat." He remained frozen in the doorway, his eyes now fixed on my pregnant belly, visible evidence of the child he'd rejected. "I don't understand," he said. This is your company?" "Skill Match, yes," I confirmed, keeping my tone professionally neutral. "I'm the founder and CEO. Please, sit down. We have a limited time slot for this interview." Marcus moved to the chair as if in a trance, his movements mechanical and stiff. He sat, still staring at me with undisguised astonishment. "I had no idea," he said. "The job posting didn't mention the name of the CEO?" "No, it wouldn't." I smiled thinly. "We focus on relevant information in our postings." The barb landed precisely as intended. A flash of discomfort crossed his face, quickly masked as he attempted to regain his composure. "I should probably withdraw my application," he said, half rising from his chair. "That's certainly your prerogative," I replied calmly. "Or we could proceed with the interview as scheduled. Your preliminary screening with our technical director was quite positive." He hesitated, clearly torn between the instinct to flee and the need for employment that had driven him to apply in the first place. "I don't think that would be appropriate, given our history." "Our history is precisely why I allowed this interview to proceed, Mr. Reed." I leaned forward slightly, meeting his eyes directly. "I was curious about what would bring you to apply for a position at my company. Now I'm even more curious, since you apparently had no idea I was involved." Marcus sank back into the chair, resignation replacing shock. "It's a legitimate coincidence," he said. "The position matches my experience, and the company has good buzz in the industry. I've been following Skill Match since the beta launch. It's an impressive concept." He paused, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "Had I known it was yours, I never would have applied." "Why not?" I asked. "Are you unqualified for the position?" "No, that's not." "Then your personal discomfort would have outweighed your professional interests?" "That's an interesting prioritization, given your current employment situation." I glanced meaningfully at his resume. Marcus's jaw tightened. "I see you've reviewed my work history." "Of course. It's my job." I picked up his resume, scanning it, with deliberate care. "You've had several transitions in the past year. Would you care to elaborate?" It was a standard interview question, but in this context, it carried additional weight. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "The market has been challenging," he said carefully. "My last full-time position ended when the company downsized. Since then, I've been taking contract roles while looking for the right permanent fit." "And what happened with North Star Tech?" I asked, naming the company where he'd worked during our relationship. "You left 6 months after last October." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, as if he hadn't expected me to track the timeline so precisely. "It wasn't a good fit anymore," he said vaguely. "I see." I set down his resume and folded my hands on my desk. "And your living situation? I believe you were purchasing a home in Magnolia last time I was aware of your personal circumstances." Marcus's face flushed. "That fell through," he said shortly. "Unfortunate." I allowed a brief pause, then redirected to standard interview questions about his experience with customer success strategies, his approach to problem solving, and his familiarity with our target market. To my surprise, he answered thoughtfully and competently. Despite his obvious discomfort, Marcus demonstrated genuine knowledge of our platform and offered several insightful suggestions for improving user onboarding. Had he been any other candidate, his responses would have been quite impressive. After 15 minutes of professional discussion, I checked my watch. We're nearly out of time. Do you have any questions for me about the position or the company? Marcus hesitated, then asked quietly, "Why are you doing this, Eliza? Why not just reject my application when you see my name?" The question hung in the air between us, breaking the pretense of a normal interview. I considered deflecting, maintaining the professional facade I'd carefully constructed, but decided against it. He deserved honesty, if only because I needed to speak my truth. "I was curious," I said simply. "When I saw your application, I wanted to understand why the man who walked away from his unborn child, who told me I wasn't CEO material, would now be seeking employment at my company." Marcus winced at the reminder of his cruel parting words. "I was wrong to say that," he admitted, surprising me with his directness. "About many things. Yes, you were." I kept my voice even though my heart had begun to race. "But that doesn't answer my question. Why apply here? Your resume suggests you've been struggling professionally. Is this desperation or something else?" He looked down at his hands, now clasped tightly in his lap. "Karma, maybe," he said with a bitter laugh. "After I left, things didn't go as planned." "The house that fell through?" I prompted. "Among other things." He glanced up briefly. "Vanessa and I split up about 3 months after that Instagram post you probably saw. Turns out she wasn't interested in a serious relationship either, just the excitement of something new. After that, well, you've seen my resume, one setback after another. I felt a complex wave of emotions, not satisfaction exactly, but a certain sense of cosmic justice. "I'm sorry things have been difficult," I said, surprising myself with my sincerity. "Are you?" He looked genuinely startled. "Yes." I rested my hand on my belly, feeling my daughter's now familiar movements. "I wouldn't wish unhappiness on anyone, not even you. But I won't pretend I'm sorry that leaving us didn't bring you the life you hoped for." Marcus nodded slowly, accepting this. "For what it's worth, which I know isn't much, I regret how I handled everything. Not just what I said, but all of it." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, maintaining my composure despite the unexpected apology. "But you're right. It isn't worth much now. I've built a new life, a good life, without you in it." A heavy silence fell between us. Marcus finally broke it by asking, "So where does this leave us? The interview, I mean." It was the question I'd been asking myself since discovering his application. The professional choice would be to thank him politely and select one of the other candidates. The vindictive choice would be to reject him outright, perhaps with a cutting remark about his qualifications. But neither option felt right. Neither acknowledged the complex reality of our situation or the remarkable journey that had brought us to this moment. Him seeking employment from the woman he'd once dismissed, me in a position to determine his professional fate. "The position pays $15 per hour to start," I said finally. "It's entry-level with a 3-month probationary period. Hours are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, with occasional evening work during product launches or special events. Full benefits begin after the probationary period." Marcus blinked, clearly processing my words. "Are you offering me the job?" "I'm describing the position," I clarified. "Before making any offers, I need to know if you could work for me, report to me, given our history. Because I need someone who can be professional, reliable, and fully committed to Skillmatch's success. I won't tolerate anything less, regardless of personal history." He seemed to consider this carefully before answering. "I can be professional," he said slowly, "and I need this job. My current contract ends next week, and I have nothing else lined up." He paused, then added, "But wouldn't it be complicated? For you, I mean?" "Complicated as founding a tech startup while 8 months pregnant," I replied with a thin smile. "This would just be unusual, and temporary if it doesn't work out. Marcus nodded, understanding the implicit warning. Then he asked the question I'd been waiting for. And the baby? Our daughter? The pronoun caught me off guard. He had never once referred to my pregnancy as our anything. My daughter, I corrected firmly, is due in 5 weeks. My personal life, including my role as her mother, is not relevant to this position, except insofar as it affects my availability during maternity leave. During that time, you would report to my technical director. He flinched slightly at my emphasis but nodded again. I understand. Do you? I leaned forward, my professional mask slipping just enough to reveal the steel beneath. Because I need to be absolutely clear. This job, if offered, would be based on your qualifications and our company's needs. It would not change anything about our personal situation. It would not give you any claim or connection to my child. Those bridges were burned the day you walked out. Marcus held my gaze, a mixture of regret and resignation in his eyes. I understand completely, he said quietly, and I accept those terms. I studied him for a long moment, searching for any sign of insincerity or hidden agenda. Finding none, I stood, signaling the end of the interview. I'll discuss all candidates with my team and make a decision by tomorrow, I said, extending my hand professionally. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Reed. He rose and shook my hand briefly, the contact, oddly formal after all we had shared. Thank you for the opportunity, he replied, his tone matching my professional detachment. As he turned to leave, I found myself calling after him. One last question I couldn't leave unasked. Marcus, why did you really leave? The real reason, he paused at the door, his back to me. For a moment I thought he might ignore the question. Then, without turning around, he said softly, Fear. Not of responsibility or commitment, but of failing at them. Of being the kind of father mine was. His shoulders sagged slightly. It was easier to leave than to risk becoming him. Before I could respond, he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him. I sank back into my chair, suddenly exhausted. The interview had gone nothing like I'd imagined. No satisfying moment of revenge, no clear vindication, just the complicated reality of two flawed humans whose paths had diverged and now might converge again under very different circumstances. Placed both hands on my belly, feeling my daughter's reassuring movements. What do you think? I whispered. Should we hire your father? Her only response was a gentle kick, leaving the decision, as always, entirely up to me. After Marcus left, I sat motionless at my desk, replaying our conversation in my mind. His final words echoed uncomfortably. Fear. Not of responsibility or commitment, but of failing at them. Of being the kind of father mine was. I had never met Marcus's father, but I knew the stories. An unpredictable man whose moods dictated the atmosphere of their home, who disappeared for days without explanation, who criticized more than he praised. Marcus rarely spoke of him, and when he did, it was with a careful detachment that I now recognized as a protective mechanism. Had I missed something fundamental about the man I'd planned to build a life with? Had his abandonment been driven not by selfishness but by a deeper, more complex fear? The possibility that the neat narrative is constructed to make sense of his betrayal. A knock at my door interrupted these thoughts. Raj poked his head in, his expression curious. How did the last interview go? You look distracted. I straightened in my chair, gathering my professional demeanor around me like armor. It was informative, I said carefully. Are you free to discuss all 3 candidates now? I'd like to make a decision today. Raj nodded, entering fully and taking the seat Marcus had vacated. Sure. I reviewed my notes during the last interview. The first candidate has the most direct customer success experience, but I was more impressed with the second's understanding of our particular market. The third had some interesting ideas about onboarding improvements, though his recent work history is a bit spotty. I nodded, focusing on the task at hand, despite the emotional undercurrent still pulling at me. Let's break down what we need for this role, I suggested. Technical proficiency, communication skills, culture fit, and commitment level. We spent the next half hour methodically evaluating each candidate across these dimensions. On paper, the first candidate, a woman with 5 years of relevant experience, was the obvious choice. But Raj seemed to favor the second, arguing that industry knowledge outweighed generic experience for our specialized platform. Neither of us mentioned Marcus's name until the very end of our discussion. So we're agreed on offering the position to Angela, I confirmed, referring to the second candidate. Raj hesitated. Actually, I was leaning toward Reed. His technical assessment scores were the highest, and he seemed to understand our product vision better than the others. I know his work history is inconsistent, but his ideas for improving the onboarding process could really help boost our retention rates. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart rate accelerated. You think he's the best fit? From a purely technical standpoint, yes, Raj affirmed. But you seemed uncomfortable with him. Was there something off in the interview? Here it was, the moment to reveal my history with Marcus or keep it private. The professional choice was clear, but something in me resisted, not out of lingering attachment, but because I didn't want Marcus's connection to me, past or present, to define his evaluation. We've met before, I admitted, choosing my words carefully. In a previous professional context. It was complicated. Raj raised an eyebrow. Complicated enough to disqualify him? That's what I'm trying to decide. He studied me for a moment. Look, Eliza, I trust your judgment. If there's a reason not to hire him, we won't. Angela is a strong second choice. I nodded, grateful for his trust. Let me sleep on it, I said finally. We'll make the offer tomorrow. After Raj left, I gathered my things and headed home earlier than usual, the weight of the decision pressing on me. As I walked to the bus stop, I pulled out my phone and called the one person who might help me see this clearly. Vivian, it's Eliza. I need your advice. 20 minutes later, I was seated across from Vivian at a quiet corner table in a cafe near the EmergeTech offices. I'd explained the interview and Raj's unexpected endorsement of Marcus as the strongest candidate. So technically, he's the best fit, Vivian summarized. But personally, it's more complicated than the Pacific Plate boundary. I smiled despite myself at her geological metaphor. That about covers it. Vivian took a thoughtful sip of her espresso. Let me ask you this. If you hire him, what's the worst possible outcome? I considered this. He could underperform, create uncomfortable workplace dynamics, or try to use the position to reinsert himself into my personal life. And if you don't hire him? I might be passing up the most qualified candidate based on personal history. The team might sense something's off about my decision-making. And I hesitated. I might be acting out of emotion rather than professional judgment. Vivian nodded. All valid concerns. But there's another angle to consider. If you hire him, you'll be sending yourself a powerful message about who's in control now. What do you mean? Think about it, she said, leaning forward. 8 months ago, this man walked out claiming you weren't CEO material. Now, you would literally be his boss, determining his professional future, setting his compensation, evaluating his performance. There's a symmetry there that feels like justice without vengeance. I hadn't considered this perspective. So you think I should hire him? I think you should make the decision that allows you to look in the mirror and respect the leader you've become, Vivian replied. Whether that means rising above personal history to hire the best candidate, or protecting your company from a potentially complicated situation, only you can determine which path represents true strength for you. Her words stayed with me through the evening as I prepared a simple dinner in Eleanor's garden apartment, organized the freshly washed baby clothes delivered by a colleague's recent shower gift, and reviewed the latest platform metrics sent by Maya. Around midnight, still unable to sleep, I sat on my small patio with a cup of herbal tea, staring up at the rare, clear Seattle night sky. My daughter was especially active, as if sensing my restlessness. "What would be the stronger choice?" I asked her quietly, placing my hand over a particularly forceful kick. "To keep him at a safe distance or to show him exactly who I've become without him?" The answer came not as a sudden revelation, but as a gradual clarity. The understanding that true strength wasn't about avoiding discomfort or seeking vindication. It was about making decisions based on principles rather than emotions, about building rather than reacting. By morning, I knew what I had to do. "You're sure about this?" Raj asked as I handed him the paperwork. "Angela would be a safer choice." "I'm sure," I confirmed. Reed scored highest on the technical assessment, and his ideas for the onboarding process align with where we need to focus before launch. That's what matters. Raj nodded, clearly relieved that I'd chosen based on merit rather than some undisclosed personal issue. "I'll call him today. When should we have him start?" "Next Monday," I decided. That gives us 2 weeks before demo day to integrate him into the team. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of preparation for our public launch. Maya had completed the final UI updates, our developer team was squashing the last known bugs, and early reviews from tech publications were overwhelmingly positive. SkillMatch was poised for success, regardless of who filled the customer success role. Around 4 p.m., Raj appeared at my office door. "Just got off the phone with Reed," he reported. He accepted the offer and seemed genuinely excited about the position. "Good," I said, surprised by my own equanimity. "Make sure his paperwork is processed before Monday." Raj lingered in the doorway. "There's something else." He asked specifically about reporting structure, wanted to confirm he'd be reporting directly to you, not to me or someone else on the team. I thought that was odd. My pulse quickened slightly. "What did you tell him?" "That all customer success staff report to the CEO until we grow large enough for a department head," Raj replied. "Standard structure for a startup our size. Was that wrong?" "No, that's correct," I assured him. "Anything else unusual about the conversation?" Raj thought for a moment. He asked about maternity leave protocols. When you'd be out, who would be in charge? I explained our contingency plan with Maya serving as interim CEO and me handling day-to-day operations. Professional interest, I assumed, given the timing. I nodded, my suspicions confirmed. Marcus was attempting to determine the power dynamics before his first day. Well, those would become abundantly clear soon enough. "Thanks for handling that," I told Raj. "Let's make sure we have a comprehensive onboarding plan ready for Monday." After Raj left, I opened my laptop and composed a brief email. "Mr. Reed, welcome to SkillMatch. We're pleased you've accepted our offer for the customer success specialist position. Please arrive at 9 a.m. on Monday for new employee orientation. Bring the completed paperwork Raj has emailed you, along with appropriate identification for I-9 verification. As discussed during your interview, this position reports directly to me. I expect professionalism, punctuality, and dedication to our company mission regardless of any previous acquaintance. SkillMatch is an equal opportunity employer that values merit, innovation, and results. Your performance will be evaluated accordingly. Regards, Eliza Bennett, CEO, SkillMatch Inc. I read it twice, ensuring the tone was appropriately professional, neither unnecessarily cold nor overly familiar. This would set the boundaries from the start. I was no longer the woman he had left. I was his employer, his superior in a workplace hierarchy that would define our interaction from this point forward. After sending the email, I turned my attention to more pressing matters, finalizing our demo day presentation, reviewing our marketing strategy for public launch, and preparing contingency plans for my eventual maternity leave. Marcus Reed was now just one small piece in the much larger puzzle of Skillmatch's future. A future I had built without him and would continue to build regardless of his presence. As I worked late into the evening, I realized something surprising. I felt no anger toward Marcus anymore, no burning desire for revenge or vindication. Those emotions had fueled my initial drive to succeed, but somewhere along the way, they had transformed into something more sustainable. Pride in what I'd created, commitment to my vision, determination to provide for my daughter. Marcus's return to my life as an employee rather than a partner was not the climactic confrontation I might once have imagined. Instead, it was merely one more challenge to navigate as a business leader, one more opportunity to demonstrate the professional judgment and emotional maturity I'd developed in his absence. Monday would mark a new chapter, not in our personal history, which was firmly closed, but in the ongoing story of Skillmatch and its founder, a story that was entirely mine to write. Monday morning arrived with a light Seattle drizzle, the kind of gentle rain that locals barely acknowledged, but that set a reflective tone for the day ahead. I arrived at the office earlier than usual, determined to establish the proper professional atmosphere before Marcus's first day began. My office door remained open as I reviewed the onboarding materials Raj had prepared. The standard welcome packet now seeming strangely intimate, given who would be receiving it, company history, which was, in part, a response to Marcus's abandonment, our mission statement, crafted during late nights when sleep eluded me after he left, the employee handbook, with policies I had written myself, including generous parental leave that I would soon be utilizing. At precisely 8:55 a.m., I heard the office door open and quiet voices in the reception area. Taking a deep breath, I remained at my desk, deliberately not going out to greet the new hire as I might normally have done. This small deviation from my usual routine was my one concession to the unusual circumstances, a buffer of formality. That seemed necessary. Raj appeared in my doorway at 9:10. Reed's here. I've got him set up with HR paperwork in the conference room. Do you want to do the welcome introduction when he's done? Or should I handle it? I'll do it, I said, my voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in my chest. Give me a heads up when he's ready. Raj nodded and disappeared, leaving me to finish reviewing the latest user metrics from our beta testers. The numbers were encouraging. Engagement rates exceeding industry standards, positive feedback on the matching algorithm's accuracy, and a growing waitlist for the public launch. This was what mattered now, I reminded myself. Not the past, not Marcus, but the company I was building. 20 minutes later, Raj texted, "Paperwork done. He's ready whenever you are." I gathered my tablet and a copy of our product roadmap, then made my way to the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Marcus sitting alone at the table, reviewing the employee handbook with focused attention. He looked up as I approached, his expression a carefully controlled mask of professional politeness. "Good morning." "Mr. Reed," I said as I entered, setting the tone immediately. "I trust the paperwork process went smoothly?" He stood awkwardly in his movements. "Yes, thank you. Everything's submitted." "Excellent." I gestured for him to sit again, then took a seat across from him rather than at the head of the table, a deliberate choice to keep this conversation more colleague-like than hierarchical. "I thought we should discuss your role and expectations before you join the rest of the team." Marcus nodded, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face before being replaced by attentive professionalism. "I'd appreciate that." I placed the product roadmap on the table between us. Skillmatch is at a critical juncture. We launch publicly in 10 days, followed by demo day for investors. Every team member's contribution during this period will be crucial to our success. "I understand the importance of timing," he said, "and I'm prepared to do whatever's needed to support a successful launch." Good. I tapped the roadmap. As customer success specialist, you'll be primarily responsible for ensuring our early adopters have a seamless experience. That means monitoring user metrics, documenting common issues, providing direct support when needed, and feeding insights back to our development team for rapid iteration. Marcus listened intently, nodding occasionally, if he found it strange. To be receiving direction from the woman he'd once dismissed as not being CEO material, he hit it well. You'll be working closely with Maya, our UI/UX lead, and reporting directly to me, I continued. During my maternity leave, you'll temporarily report to Raj, but all major decisions will still come through me. At the mention of my pregnancy, his eyes briefly dropped to my belly before returning to my face. When are you due? He asked, the question hovering uncomfortably between professional inquiry and personal interest. 4 weeks, I replied briskly. The timing isn't ideal with the launch, but we've developed comprehensive contingency plans. Maya and Raj will handle daily operations while I maintain strategic oversight, mostly remotely. He nodded, accepting this information without comment. Then, after a brief hesitation, he asked, Is the team aware of our previous connection? It was the question I'd been anticipating. No, I said firmly. And I see no reason to complicate workplace dynamics by sharing that information. Do you? No, he agreed quickly. I think it's better kept private. Then we're aligned on that point. I stood, signaling an end to our private conversation. Let's introduce you to the team. They're eager to have additional support for the launch preparations. As we walked toward the main workspace, I added quietly, For the record, Marcus, I expect nothing less than your absolute best work. I won't tolerate subpar performance or special treatment in either direction because of our history. This is a professional relationship now, nothing more, nothing less. Understood, he replied, his tone matching my businesslike demeanor. I'm here to work, Eliza, to contribute to what you've built. That's all. I paused, turning to face him directly. It's Ms. Bennett in the office, I corrected. Or Eliza if we're being informal as a team, but not with the familiarity of our past. A flash of something, hurt, acknowledgement, crossed his features before he nodded. Of course, Ms. Bennett. My mistake. Satisfied that the boundaries were clear, I led him into the main work area where the rest of our small team was gathered for the Monday morning stand-up meeting. Everyone, this is Marcus Reed, our new customer success specialist. He's joining us just in time for launch preparations. The team offered welcoming smiles and brief introductions. Maya immediately engaged him with questions about his background and user experience. Raj mentioned the onboarding issues they'd been discussing during the interview. The integration was smooth, professional, everything I could have hoped for, under the circumstances. I stepped back, watching the interaction with a strange sense of detachment. There was Marcus, the man who had shared my bed, my dreams, my life. Now just another employee in my growing company. The surreal nature of it struck me suddenly, and I had to suppress an inappropriate urge to laugh at the sheer improbability of our situation. Everything okay? Vivian's voice came from behind me, startling me from my thoughts. I turned to find her observing the scene with keen interest. Just fine, I assured her. First day onboarding. Her eyes tracked to Marcus, then back to me with a raised eyebrow. So you hired him? He was the most qualified candidate, I said simply. A smile ghosted across her lips. And how does it feel? Being on the other side of the power dynamic? I considered this. Less satisfying than you might imagine, I admitted quietly. It feels irrelevant, actually. Like that chapter is so thoroughly closed that this new connection barely registers as significant. Vivian nodded approvingly. That's how you know you've truly moved on. When revenge loses its appeal because you're too busy building something better. She was right, I realized. The emotional satisfaction I might once have anticipated from this role reversal was muted by the simple fact that I had far more important priorities now, The company's success, my daughter's imminent arrival, the future I was creating that had nothing to do with Marcus Reed. I have an investor call in 10 minutes, Vivian said, checking her watch. But I wanted to remind you about the pre-launch press interviews tomorrow. TechCrunch at 10, GeekWire at 2. They're particularly interested in the pregnant founder. Angle? So be prepared for personal questions. I groaned slightly. Just what I need. More focus on my personal life. Use it, Vivian advised pragmatically. The story of a woman building a successful startup while preparing for single motherhood is compelling. It differentiates you in a crowded field and resonates with potential investors who want to back founders with demonstrated resilience. I suppose, I conceded reluctantly, as long as the focus eventually shifts to the platform itself. It will, she assured me. Success is the ultimate headline changer. After Vivian departed, I returned to my office, leaving Raj to complete Marcus's orientation. Through my glass wall, I could see them touring the workspace. Marcus nodding attentively as Raj explained our systems and introduced him to other team members. He appeared genuinely engaged, professionally appropriate, exactly what I needed him to be. The rest of the day passed in a blur of pre-launch activities. I was immersed in finalizing our investor pitch deck when Raj appeared at my door around 5 p.m. Reed's first day went well, he reported. He's already documented several user friction points we missed and suggested some targeted improvements to the help documentation. Solid hire. Good, I said, genuinely pleased despite the complicated circumstances. Have him prioritize those improvements for implementation before launch. Raj nodded, then hesitated. There's one thing. He asked to speak with you before leaving today. Something about the onboarding process. I glanced at my watch, considering. A private conversation with Marcus wasn't high on my list of desires, but refusing a new employee's request to speak with the CEO would be unprofessional and conspicuous. Send him in, I decided, but I only have a few minutes before my next call. Marcus appeared moments later, his expression carefully neutral as he entered my office. Thank you for seeing me, he began, remaining standing despite the chair available across from my desk. I wanted to clarify something about my role. Go ahead, I prompted, keeping my tone professionally courteous. The job description mentioned potential travel to client sites for specialized onboarding sessions, he said. Given your due date, I wanted to confirm if that's still expected in the next month, so I can plan accordingly. It was a legitimate professional question, yet something in his careful avoidance of directly mentioning my pregnancy irritated me. The travel component won't be implemented until after public launch, I clarified. By then, I'll be on maternity leave, but the schedule will be coordinated through Raj. Is that your only question? He shifted slightly, his professional facade cracking just enough to reveal something more personal beneath. Actually, there is one more thing, he said, his voice dropping slightly. I wanted to thank you for this opportunity. I know you had other qualified candidates, and given our history. He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. I won't let you down, Ms. Bennett. The formality of Ms. Bennett in his mouth, after years of intimate familiarity, struck me as both appropriate and absurd, but I appreciated the effort at professional boundaries. See that you don't, I replied simply. Skill Match's success depends on every team member performing at their best. I expect nothing less from you than I do from anyone else on the team. He nodded, accepting this. Understood. I'll see you tomorrow then. As he turned to leave, I found myself saying, Marcus. He paused, looking back questioningly. The job description mentioned a potential performance review after 30 days, with possible salary adjustment based on results. That timeline still applies, regardless of my maternity leave. Something to keep in mind. A flicker of something, determination? Hope? Crossed his face. I'll make those 30 days count, he promised. and then he was gone, leaving me with the strange sensation of having just managed a bizarre balancing act between employer and ex-partner. As the office emptied for the evening, I remained at my desk, reviewing financial projections and mentally preparing for tomorrow's press interviews. My daughter was especially active tonight, her movements a constant reminder of the new life approaching, a life that would exist entirely separate from Marcus, despite his biological connection. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Dinners. In your refrigerator. Don't work too late, CEO or not. I smiled, gathering my things. There were people in my life now who genuinely cared about my well-being. Eleanor, Vivian, Zoe, my team. I had built not just a company but a community around myself and my daughter. Whatever complications Marcus's presence might bring, they paled in comparison to the solid foundation I had established. As I passed the now empty desk where Marcus would work for the foreseeable future, I felt no regret, no lingering attachment, no desire for emotional resolution. There was only the quiet certainty that I had made the professionally correct choice, regardless of our personal history. And that perhaps was the clearest sign of how completely I had moved on. Not just surviving his abandonment, but thriving, beyond it in ways neither of us could have imagined. The 2 weeks leading up to SkillMatch's public launch passed in a whirlwind of activity. Our office became a hub of focused energy, developers working through final bug fixes, marketing finalizing press releases, and our newly expanded customer success team, now consisting of Marcus and 2 part-time specialists we'd hired to handle the anticipated user influx, preparing support documentation and training materials. To my private surprise, Marcus proved himself to be an exceptional employee. He arrived early each day, stayed late when needed, and brought a level of attention to detail that significantly improved our user onboarding process. The customer success email templates he drafted were clear and personable. The help documentation he revised was intuitive, and the tracking system he implemented for user questions revealed valuable patterns we could address before they became widespread issues. "Reed's killing it," Raj commented during our weekly leadership meeting 3 days before launch. The user journey maps he created have already helped us identify and fix 4 potential friction points. Guy's got serious UX instincts, Maya nodded in agreement. He's been incredibly helpful with the final interface tweaks, very user-focused. I acknowledged their feedback with professional neutrality, though internally, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Part of me was genuinely pleased that my controversial hiring decision was proving beneficial for the company. Another part, a part I was less proud of, felt a strange vindication that Marcus was now witnessing firsthand what I had built, what I was capable of creating without him. Our interactions remained strictly professional. In team meetings, he addressed me as Ms. Bennett, with the same respectful tone he used for Raj and Maya. When we needed to discuss specific projects one-on-one, he maintained appropriate eye contact and focused solely on work-related topics. If the situation felt as surreal to him as it sometimes did to me, he never let it show. The only hint of our shared history came during a late-night launch preparation session, when I caught him staring at my pregnant belly with an unreadable expression while I was reviewing metrics with Maya. When he noticed me observing him, he quickly looked away, returning to his task with renewed focus. I chose not to address it, maintaining the careful professional distance we'd established. Launch day arrived with the kind of perfect timing that seemed almost scripted, exactly 1 month before my due date, giving me just enough runway to establish SkillMatch in the market before my maternity leave began. The team gathered early, the office humming with nervous excitement as we prepared for the 9 a.m. release. "Systems check complete," Raj announced from his station. "Servers are scaled and ready." "Social media campaign prepped to go live on launch," Maya added. "Press releases have been distributed to all channels." I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. This was it. Months of work, sacrifice, and determination culminating in this single moment. I thought briefly of where I'd been 8 months ago. Heartbroken, alone, afraid for my future. Now I stood surrounded by a team I'd built, about to launch a company I'd created from nothing but an idea and sheer determination. Customer success. Team is ready, Marcus reported, his voice pulling me from my reflection. Support channels are live, and we've prepared response templates for the most likely scenarios. We're expecting heavy volume in the first 48 hours. Thank you, I said, meeting his eyes briefly. The professional courtesy in his gaze revealed nothing of our complicated past, just a dedicated employee reporting to his CEO. I moved to the center of the room, where everyone could see me. Before we go live, I want to thank each of you for your extraordinary work. When I started SkillMatch, it was just an idea born from a personal understanding of the market's shortcomings. Now, it's a reality because of your talent, dedication, and belief in our mission. The team gathered closer, their expressions a mixture of pride and anticipation. Whatever happens today, whether we see 1,000 signups or 10, remember that we've built something valuable, something that solves a real problem for real people. That's an achievement worth celebrating, regardless of what the market metrics tell us. I turned to Raj. Ready when you are. With a few keystrokes, he pushed the final deployment, and SkillMatch was officially live to the public. There was no dramatic moment, no flashing lights or sirens, just the quiet transition from closed beta to public availability, our platform, now open to anyone who wanted to use it. For about 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then the first notification pinged. A new user sign-up, then another, and another. Within minutes, the dashboard was tracking a steady stream of new accounts. Creating profiles, businesses posting projects, freelancers applying their specialized skills criteria. It's working, Maya whispered, eyes glued to the metrics screen. The floodgates had opened. By noon, we had over 300 active users exploring the platform. By 2 p.m., the first matches were being made. Real businesses connecting with freelancers who precisely matched their industry-specific needs. By the end of day, we had over 1,000 signups and 15 completed project agreements, with users from across the country and a few international early adopters. The launch was, by any measure, a tremendous success. The team celebrated with champagne, sparkling cider for me, as the final user numbers for the day came in, far exceeding our most optimistic projections. To SkillMatch, Raj toasted, raising his glass, and to our fearless leader who made it happen against all odds. As the team clinked glasses, I caught Marcus watching me from across the room. For once, his carefully maintained professional mask had slipped, revealing a complex mixture of emotions: admiration, regret, and something. That might have been pride, though not the possessive kind. It was the pride of someone witnessing something genuinely impressive, regardless of their personal connection to it. I nodded slightly in acknowledgement, and he returned the gesture before turning away to join a conversation with Maya. Some recognitions required no words. The week following launch continued to exceed expectations. User growth remained strong, with industry blogs positively reviewing our specialized matching algorithms and targeted approach. Investor interest surged, with several venture capital firms reaching out ahead of our upcoming demo day. I was reviewing these promising metrics in my office when a sharp pain caused me to wince, my hand automatically moving to my belly. It passed quickly, and I dismissed it as the Braxton Hicks contractions my doctor had mentioned might become more frequent in the final weeks. But 20 minutes later, another came, stronger than the first, and then another, concerning regularity. A call to my doctor confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. I was in early labor, 3 weeks ahead of schedule. "I need to go to the hospital," I announced, appearing in the doorway of our main workspace, where the team was gathered around a table reviewing user feedback. "The baby has apparently decided that post-launch metrics aren't exciting enough." The room erupted in surprised exclamations and immediate offers of assistance. Maya grabbed my hospital bag, which I'd been keeping in the office closet, just in case. Raj called for a car while simultaneously texting Vivian and the board of directors. The junior developers began implementing our pre-arranged leadership transition protocols. Throughout the commotion, Marcus stood frozen, his face pale with shock. This clearly wasn't part of the professional scenario he'd prepared for when accepting the position. As I gathered my things, trying to remain calm despite the increasing frequency of contractions, he approached cautiously. "Is there anything you need?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral despite the obvious awkwardness of the situation. "Just make sure the customer success team maintains regular reporting while I'm out," I replied, keeping our interaction strictly professional despite the circumstances. "Maya and Raj know the plan." He nodded, then added more quietly, "Good luck with everything." Before I could respond, Maya appeared at my side, ushering me toward the elevator with practiced efficiency. "Cars waiting downstairs. Hospital's been notified. Eleanor's meeting us there." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of hospital rooms, medical professionals, and the intense focus of bringing new life into the world. Eleanor stayed by my side throughout, her steady presence a comfort during the most challenging moments. Zoe arrived partway through, bearing flowers and determined encouragement. And then, at 3:17 a.m., my daughter arrived, 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfection with a strong cry and a full head of dark hair. As the nurse placed her in my arms for the first time, the world seemed to stop. Everything else fading into insignificance compared to this tiny human who had been my companion through the most transformative period of my life. "Hello, Sophia," I whispered, the name I'd chosen months ago finally belonging to a real person. "We did it." 2 weeks later, I stood in my living room, gently rocking Sophia while on a video call with the Skill Match leadership team. Eleanor moved quietly in the background, preparing dinner and occasionally casting approving glances at my daughter, who had become the center of our shared household. Demo day was an unprecedented success. Raj was reporting, his excitement evident, even through the screen. 3 firm investment offers already, with 2 more indicating strong interest pending final due diligence. "The user growth is sustaining better than projected," Maya added. "We're at 327% of our target for week 3, with consistently positive feedback on the matching quality." I smiled, genuinely pleased though, exhausted from the beautiful chaos of new motherhood. "That's excellent news. What about customer support volume? Are we keeping up with the growth?" "That's actually going better than expected," Raj replied. "Reed implemented a tiered response system that's significantly reducing resolution time. He also trained the part-timers on handling specialized industry questions, which has improved our quality metrics." "He's been putting in extra hours," Maya commented. "Often the first in, last out. Seems determined to prove himself." I nodded, unsurprised. "His 30-day review is coming up next week. Based on performance, would you recommend the standard salary adjustment?" Raj and Maya exchanged glances. "Actually," Raj said, "given his contributions to the launch success and the customer support innovations, I'd recommend considering him for the senior specialist position we discussed creating once we hit 10,000 users. We're already at 8,700, so it seems timely." The suggestion gave me pause. The senior position would come with significantly higher compensation and more responsibility, a substantial promotion from entry-level customer support. Based on performance alone, Marcus had earned the consideration. But there was no denying the complex personal dynamics involved. "Let me think about it," I said carefully. "He's certainly exceeding expectations, but any structural changes should align with our overall growth strategy." After concluding the call, I settled on my couch with Sophia sleeping peacefully against my chest, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger. In the quiet of my apartment, with my daughter's gentle breathing as a soundtrack. I considered the strange circular journey that had brought me to this moment. 8 months ago, Marcus had walked out, dismissing my potential and rejecting our child. Now, that same man was excelling at the company I'd built in his absence, while I held the daughter he'd never met. A daughter who was thriving under the love and care of the community I'd created around us. The irony wasn't lost on me. The next morning, after a night of surprisingly decent sleep, Sophia had gifted me with a 4-hour stretch for the first time. I made a decision. I emailed HR, authorizing Marcus's 30-day performance review with instructions to include the possibility of the senior position in the evaluation. Professional merit would determine his path forward, regardless of our history. That was the kind of leader I had become. One who could separate personal feelings from business decisions, who could recognize value objectively, who could build rather than retaliate. A week later, as I was feeding Sophia during our morning routine, my phone pinged with a notification. It was an automated update from our HR system. Marcus Reed had accepted the promotion to Senior Customer Success Specialist, with the accompanying salary increase and expanded responsibilities. He would now be leading a team of 4 as we continued to scale. I smiled down at my daughter, her eyes blinking sleepily as she finished her breakfast. "Your mommy built something important," I told her softly. "Something that will give us the life we deserve, on our own terms." She yawned in response, unimpressed by corporate achievements but perfectly content in the circle of my arms. In that moment, the journey felt complete. Not because of Marcus's role in my company, which was ultimately incidental, but because of the strength I'd discovered within myself. I had transformed abandonment into independence, rejection into resilience, fear into foundation. The woman who had once been left behind was now leading the way forward, creating a future bright with possibility for herself and her daughter. As I placed Sophia in her bassinet, my phone rang. Vivian, calling with news of another major investor interested in our next funding round. I answered with one hand while gently rocking the bassinet with the other, moving seamlessly between the roles of CEO and mother. This was my life now. Not the one I had planned with Marcus, but something better. Something built through determination, supported by genuine community, and sustained by the kind of love that doesn't walk away when challenges arise. Full circle, indeed. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.